a flag in my car. A little one.
No, it's fine.
I got the flag all worked out, guys.
Okay. Ah, beautiful.
Oops.
No, we're not there yet. We're gonna
No, not yet.
click on when we do the pledge and click it off after the pledge.
Wow.
Highly produced product here.
Yeah.
Are we ready to go, Chris, you think, at this point?
Yes, we're live on YouTube and we are recording. We're all set.
Recording. Yep.
All right, okay. Well,
Beautiful.
we'll call the meeting to order. I'll read the notice here. Adequate notice of this meeting has been provided by the board in preparation of the 2020 annual meeting notice, which sets forth the date, time, and place of this meeting, and by properly posting such notice and forwarding the notice to those designated newspapers and persons requesting meeting notices. Moreover, in order to comply with the national and state declarations of emergency related to the COVID-19 pandemic in accordance with the municipal land use law, the Open Publics Meeting Act, and the recent operational documents from the Department of Community Affairs, the meeting is being held virtually as a web-based platform with remote public access. All right, very good. Now we do our Pledge of Allegiance here. Let's get our flag up. All right.
Then,
Pledge allegiance to the flag
the
United States of America
and
to the republic
for
for
which
which
it
it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God,
under God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
with
with
liberty,
liberty,
justice,
justice for all.
justice
for all. All right, how about that, huh? That was fun. All right, how about a roll call, Chris? Maybe before we do a roll call, let's say welcome to Amanda. I don't know if you've had the pleasure of joining this august body before, so welcome here. So it's great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
We also want to welcome one of our guests, Tom Getzendanner. How are you all today? Good. So why don't we go with a roll call?
Chairman Anderson,
Here.
Vice Chairman Brinkerhoff,
here.
Councilmember Little,
Here.
Ms. Paulson Alvarez,
Here.
Mr. Drummond,
Here.
Ms. McNeil,
Here.
Mr. Delory,
Here.
Mr. Zucker,
Here.
Mr. Perella,
Here.
Mr. Fiore, Mr. Fiore,
Here. You
And-
sure?
Mr. Formicelli,
Here.
and for the record, Mr. Warner's here. He's our board attorney. You have a quorum. You can proceed.
Okay.
Thank
thank you. All right. So first item of business here is our minutes from February 24th, our last meeting in which we went together. Any comments, suggestions with regard to that?
Bill, I have two, if I may.
Sure, please, Jay. Thanks.
They both have to do with 83 Maple Street. If you take a look at the last sentence of the first paragraph, it says, Mr. Weber noted that the lot average calculation is skewed due to the connection in school lots. The T and the and the C in connection should be capitalized. That's obviously a proper noun. It's a place. And if you read that without knowing that, it reads rather odd. What connection? I think to clarify, Chris, unless anyone has an objection, I'd capitalize T and C for the connection.
Okay, no problem.
And then a little more substantively, if you go down to the paragraph that begins with Ms. Kimberly Tone, this is the area where Jim Weber decided not to proceed with the meeting. And the way it reads now is, go to about the third or fourth line. Mr. Weber clarified that the plans were done but not filed with the city. Chairman Anderson asked the board if they had any reservations about hearing further testimony about the architectural plans. And it says the board felt that additional plans we submitted. I don't think that quite gets it right. I think it was more than just plans. I think there were a number of significant items that were missing, and a number of us asked questions about that. I think we should say at least something like in addition, additional plans and other relevant submittals or something
Grading
to.
plan and attached
Jay,
to-
I think you wanted the landscape design was one of the things that you had talked about, that was not included.
Well, I think there was no grade plan report. There was no drawings for the, we don't need to list what was missing, but I think it need to say that the board felt that additional plans we submitted, it's a little bit soft. I think there was the fact that Jim Weber basically appropriately took a time out then. I don't blame him. I would have done the same. Suggests that he realized that he really hadn't given us some appropriate material. I think there needs a little bit more detail with respect to that.
I guess we had one set of plans for one home and not another set of plans for the other home. I know that was something that people were concerned about.
There were no drawing, there was no elevation for the garages, even just an elevation. So I think that could be warrants at least a little bit more than the words architectural plans. Something like an additional submission material or additional drawings and information, something like to that effect.
Okay, no problem.
That's it.
You might
Anyone
want
else?
to add and site plan just because it's not an architectural plan.
Okay, thanks, Jennifer. Any other comments?
There's just a small typo in the paragraph that starts with the prod zone. The fifth sentence, it says EEE and it should just be B at the end of that sentence.
After CAR T therapy to be mass produced.
Yeah, right, instead
It's,
of BE.
Yeah, I got it. Thanks.
Anyone else? Any other comments?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, great. Well, thanks. I guess we feel comfortable, given the guidance we've given Chris, that we can approve this subject to the suggestions.
Yeah, we can approve these as amended.
Okay, and Chris, do you want to do a voice vote or do we need to do a official roll call?
You should entertain a motion as
Yeah.
amended.
How about that? Yes.
So moved.
And a second.
Second.
All right, thank you.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
Okay, great, thank you. All right, so we know that the public hearing for 83 Maple Street has been moved to May, and 43 Woodland Avenue also carried to the May meeting. So that really leaves us the council referral to the ordinance.
Mr. Chairman, I apologize for interrupting, but if I may, just to clarify, those adjournments of Cardone Contracting in Beechwood to May 18, 2020 will be at 7:30 p.m. without further notice, with the possibility, if not probable, it will be a virtual meeting with a web-based platform as well. Would that be correct?
Yes. We need a motion for each one, right?
Oh, you don't need a motion to carry them,
Okay.
per se. No, I just wanted to be clear that they're without further notice
Yep.
for the benefit of the public. And I apologize for the interruption.
Oh, no, thanks, Mr. Warner. I appreciate that very much. We're going to get it done properly. All right, so that leads us to item 7 on the agenda, which is basically the ordinance amending in the prod zone of the CAR T explanation as it relates to the retail, clarification of the retail portion of it. And we have the pending ordinance that came from council on 4/14, sent to us by Rosemary on the 15th. We have the master plan consistency ordinance drafted by Steve and his team. And then the master plan consistency review memo that Burgess and Associates did. So it seems to me that maybe the thing to do would be to have Mr. Burgess run through his recommendation or his memo, and then open it up for questions for the board, either relating to the ordinance from council or the master plan consistency ordinance.
Okay,
All right, thanks, Joe.
all right, thank you. We had prepared a memo dated April 23rd where we commented on the ordinance. Technically, the municipal land use law provides that a planning board is obligated to make a consistency determination. And as we've discussed previously, the term consistency is somewhat of a misnomer because technically the statute says you have to make a determination as to whether or not the proposed ordinance is inconsistent or not with the master plan. At the outset, I will say that we made the determination that the proposed ordinance is consistent, not inconsistent, with the master plan. As some background information, back in 2017, the prod zone had been amended to permit research and development, as well as the commercial production and processing of CAR therapies, which are chimeric antigen receptor T cell therapies, as well as biotherapeutic therapies. And at that time, the planning board had made the determination that the proposed modification or amendment was consistent with the master plan. There has not been any change to the intent and purpose of the master plan relative to this zone since that time. And the main thrust of this amendment is simply to clarify that CAR biotherapeutic therapies can be sold and delivered to, as enumerated in the ordinance, to hospitals, medical facilities, and medical professionals authorized to administer the CAR and biotherapeutic therapies. Now, I will say as background information that it had always been contemplated that that was part and parcel of the ordinance, but with new owners taking over the former Celgene tract, they just wanted clarification for the purposes of clarity. So we are amending the ordinance, to specifically reflect that fact. The important part is that this does not permit the retail sales of those uses on site. It does not call for visitors to the site for any purpose other than where they're doing specific evaluations for the purposes of research and development, and then allow them following that research and development to sell and deliver those component parts and therapies to the groups that I mentioned: hospitals, medical facilities, and medical professionals. All other components of the PRD zone remain in place. None of the area and bulk requirements are modified by virtue of this application. None of the other uses are modified by this application. The overall purpose set forth in the current zoning ordinance remains the same. It's a fairly straightforward process. This is a very straightforward ordinance amendment. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that the board or the public may have.
Seems pretty straightforward, Joe, at least in this regard, given we've had the hearing and they've presented to us and been to council as well. I guess the next step, assuming we're okay with this, is that it goes to council for a second and final reading. Is that correct?
Yes, your responsibility is to make a recommendation back to the council, identifying the fact as to whether or not you believe it's consistent or not. My report, I believe, speaks for itself. And in the past, the board has used our report to forward it on to the governing body as the report of the planning board, and you can do that here.
Yeah. Mr. Warner, that seems like it makes sense to me.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would just simply add that we did provide for the board a two-page resolution essentially attaching Mr. Burgess's report and the ordinance in the event that the board were to make a determination this evening that the plan was not inconsistent, or even go so far as to say it is consistent with the master plan. And given that it's a finding, as I may have mentioned in the past, it's at least, in my opinion, a best practice to do it by way of resolution. So it incorporates the finding of the board. And the resolution, of course, calls for a roll call vote, and then the resolution with the report and the ordinance would be forwarded back to the governing body within the 35-day timeframe that we're afforded under the municipal land use law to make our master plan consistency
No,
finding.
that's fine. Steve, I do have one question. Should I have been sworn in, or should I be sworn in for the purpose of the record? I don't know if it's necessary for this kind of.
That's fine, yeah, and technically, no, it's not a public hearing per se under section 26 of the municipal land use law. The public hearing in this process, of course, would come back at the governing body level.
Correct.
On second reading, there'll be a public hearing on the entirety of the ordinance. So being sworn in was not necessary, just assisting the board with your opinion as a professional planner. And for the reasons stated, that it's not inconsistent with the master plan is sufficient for the board. The chair has the discretion to open it up to questions and comments, both from the board and if the chair so desires, beyond board members.
Yeah, I
Okay,
think
thank you.
we should open it up to questions, obviously, from the board members. I know Ms. Alfonso is here. And then I know we're not necessarily have to open it up to the public for questions, but I see Mr. Getzendanner's here. So maybe we'll take it in order from the board to Ms. Alfonso and then Mr. Getzendanner. Any board members with questions or comments with regard to this?
I have a question.
Ms. Bolson Alvarez.
Hi. I had a question about, my recollection is when we decided it was consistent with the master plan, we also were considering we made that opinion after considering the volume levels that were involved. And I just wondered, because this is exciting, this is positive. this is
I'm losing you
great,
completely.
Yeah, Jennifer, we're losing you.
hopeful, What? You're losing me. Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Get a little closer to your,
you know what? Yeah, I haven't had this problem before. Let me type the question.
Something's wrong with your.
yeah, something.
I can type it. Yeah.
Okay.
While she's doing that, I have a quick question. Is there a distinction between finding consistent and not inconsistent?
Technically, yes. Because the MLUL requires only that the planning board find it to be substantially consistent with the intent and purpose of the master plan, the ordinances, and it uses the terminology of determining what portions, if any, are inconsistent with the master plan and addressing those inconsistencies. So for those reasons, it's
So if
developed. You can either find it not inconsistent, which is sufficient, or you could find it consistent, which is even more of an affirmative finding, if you will, and
But they
rises
don't
to
have
an even
any
greater
less,
level.
and they don't have any more or any less rights if it's found consistent or not inconsistent.
Absolutely not. Either way, you're returning it to the governing body on referral by saying, in essence, it met the standard. And frankly, even if this planning board determined that it was inconsistent, the governing body can nevertheless, with an effective majority, in other words, a majority of the full body of the governing body, along with what we call a reasons resolution, an explanation why, they could nevertheless proceed forward with the ordinance, even if this planning board found it to be inconsistent.
Thank you.
The other comments? Jennifer, are you still typing? Okay, keep typing. Okay, understanding. Boy, I don't know the answer to that one.
Somebody,
Maybe that's-
I'm not seeing this on my screen. Can somebody read it to me?
It says, understanding that this is a positive and consistent with the master plan at the anticipated volume levels, I assume volumes of people coming and going, and the volume of activity on site. At what point does the volume become not consistent and need to be offloaded to a light industrial zone. I'm not sure.
In their traffic report, they had indicated a very modest, limited increase in volume, and yet the road network can still accommodate the traffic volumes that are being anticipated. If, for example, the volumes went from an acceptable level to a level of service F, for example, then you could start questioning this application or the ordinance, but that is not the case here.
I believe we asked for an annual update on the volumes going in and out, something to that effect, if
Yes.
my memory serves me correctly.
Yes, and that's why they showed that it's a very limited increase, primarily associated with the vans that would be coming to the site, for the commercial aspect of this.
Does that answer the question, Jennifer?
Partially.
Well, I did talk to one council member about it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Oh, we can.
And they thought it was a valid question. It wasn't sure the answer because this is this language will stay this way, understanding the volume levels they anticipate today. But in 10 years, the language will still be the same, but hopefully this will be a great success. And at some point, it's just going to be too much for that site, for our master plan, for that zone. I just want to know what happens then. What's the recourse then?
When you zone something for a particular use, the understanding is that you've made that determination. Given the myriad of uses on the property, all interrelated, but myriad of uses, you might have what I'll call an ebb and flow of volume from one type of activity to the next. And the anticipation, if I recall from some of the testimony from 2017, was that while the ebb and flow might change, the overall quantity of volume is not going to change. And as I said at the outset of my comments, this kind of a use had always been contemplated. It's just that Bristol-Myers Squibb wanted it affirmatively identified in the ordinance to make certain that they never would have a question about this.
And I guess maybe part of the answer is that if in those annual appraisals reports that they provide us that we're running into large volumes, I think we have to revisit it at that point.
Oh, that is true, because we do have that out. They are required to submit the annual report, including an annual level of vehicular traffic. And I think by asking for that and them agreeing to it, it certainly suggests that they understand that there might have to be modifications somewhere along the line.
Okay.
If the volumes got that excessive.
I would just add that given the size of that campus, the number of
Lose everybody?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just going to suggest simply, given the size of that campus, the number of changes they've talked about over time, they've taken down buildings, they'll be adding buildings. We'll get plenty of bites at the apple, it seems to me, as BSM evolves from what Celgene is doing to what they're doing.
Yeah.
I don't know if you heard me before, but don't they have a defined number of parking spots, a defined number of entrances and exits within that site? So if this thing explodes and becomes a great, medication, and it exceeds their campus, they're not going to be able to have cars there that exceed their parking and whatnot. So, I mean, they're not going to be able to double up spots. They're going to have to go somewhere else if the thing becomes such a great success. They're limited, even though their traffic study says they're probably only going to have 36 cars or whatever, they're still limited by what the site has. So they can't exceed that.
And they have a reserve, if I'm using the correct terminology, a banking of over 500 spaces beyond what's currently shown on the plan. So the capacity that we're providing to the site is pretty substantial.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? If not, Let's go to Ms. Alfonso. I know you're here. I see you. Hi there. How are you?
Hi,
Would you have any thing you'd like to add or say with regard to the ordinance?
thank you. I think Mr. Burgess really summed it up. BMS is looking to clarify the existing permitted uses, the existing ordinance. And I appreciate your question, Ms. Balsan Alvarez, and if I may, I would ditto what some of the board members said there. We do have the general development plans, multiple site plans, especially coming down the line with the 2 recent GDPs. So there will be a lot of opportunities for BMS to review that study, redo studies for the traffic, and provide that annual report as well. Thank you.
Any other comments? I see there are some folks here, Tom, from the zoning board and some others I don't recognize. Anyone else like to have a comment or question? Tom Getzendanner, you want to unmute? Have any questions for us? All right, okay. Looks like we're out of questions and comments. Can I have a motion to approve?
So
So moved.
In a second.
Second.
All right. And we do a roll call vote here, Mr. Warner,
Please, Mr. Chairman, for the resolution, yes.
Mr. Secretary?
Chairman Anderson,
Yes.
Vice Chairman Brinkerhoff,
Yes.
Councilmember Little,
yes.
Balsan Alvarez,
Yes.
Mr. Drummond,
Yes.
Ms. McNeil,
Yes.
Delory,
yes,
Ms. Zucker,
Yes.
Mr. Perrella.
Yes.
All right, thank you. We have 2 more items on the agenda that are not actually written on the agenda, but they're written on my agenda because I just wrote them in. Anyway, Jay is going to give us an update sort of on where we are with our review of the DRO.
Okay, thank you. Over the past couple of months, Councilmember Little and Chairman Anderson and I have been having regular conference calls with Krista Anderson and Tom Behrens, Tom of Joe's office, to review the revised DRO that we completed back in December. Krista and Tom have been going through the documents literally page by page and bringing to our attention recommendations and questions. I'd characterize these really as minor edits, clarifications, administrative changes to make the document easier to work with and remove some inconsistencies. Nearly all the suggestions are administrative or organizational. We've clarified a few discrepancies where we changed something in the new ordinance and it didn't get picked up in another paragraph, for example. We've added a few definitions which were missing. We've changed those to reflect the new document rather than the old one. We moved some things around to make it more logical. We asked Tom to improve some of the maps, some of the other background support material. Having done all that, we have a call tomorrow. We probably have 1 or 2 more and we'll finish the entire document. At that point, Tom is going to give us a red line. We'll go through that and then we'll send all of that to you. I'm bringing this up now, or we are bringing this up now, because frankly, it's going to look like a lot of changes. So don't be surprised. But as you take the time to look at them, you'll see they're really primarily administrative, organizational, clarifying things. There are no changes in policy, nothing in scope. Of course not, but I just want to say that none of that is being addressed. We've discussed a couple of things that when we thought about them and debated them, we think we should reconsider these at the board level. So you're not going to see that in the red line you get, but there's a couple of things, probably in the zoning area, for example, we thought about and said, we should probably rethink about this with those. So we'll do that when time permits after we get through this phase. As I said, you'll see a red line. I think it's going to be another month or 2 because we've been meeting regularly, but Tom has to do a pretty significant red line for us. So just wanted to give you all a heads up on this. You should know Krista and Tom have done a great job. They're really going through this document, and I think we're going to be proud of this. It's going to be a valuable working document. Remember, it's 450 pages. They've really worked hard, and Councilmember Little and Chairman Anderson and I think we'll all share the view that they've really done us a great service. So I wanted you to know about that. They deserve a big thank you.
Yep.
Any for Councilman Anderson or I'm sorry, Councilmember Little or Bill, anything I missed or anything you'd like to add for everyone else?
I would just reiterate what you just said. I've been very impressed with Krista's attention to detail and the fact that she's been able to tackle this during this time when she's already dealing with working remotely and all the attendance stress and changes to her, workload and schedule that she's dealing with on top of this. So she's been just going through this with a fine tooth comb. We've had very productive meetings, a series of meetings. So thank you to Tom and Krista, especially for all the work that's gone into the review so far.
Yeah, I have nothing to add to that. It's been really well done. So I appreciate that. I just have one other thing that I'd like to mention, and I just finished mine about 30 minutes ago. And I was going through my emails and I said, here's an email from Rosemary, financial disclosure form. Uh-oh, I better fill that out because it's almost the end of April. So I'm just here to say, you all probably have done all this and you're all up to date on that. I just finished mine 30 minutes ago. So it's just one of those little nits and gnats we need to take care of.
I did mine today. I did mine today too, Bill. So.
Yes, very good. Excellent. Well, I knew Beth was going to ask me, so I wanted to be sure that I had done it. All right. So any other questions or comments for the good of the cause? Shall we adjourn or shall we? I had it with one of my clients. I had last Friday a virtual happy hour where everybody showed up on Zoom with their favorite libation. And it was a lot of fun. So, maybe we'll do that next time.
There you go. Mr. Chairman, I'll check the municipal land use law, make sure I can find the right provision.
Oh, that's good. Thank you. I appreciate that. Please don't bill us for that.
No.
Anyway, anything else from anyone at all? All right. How about a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
All right. Thank you all. We'll see you next month.
All right.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night. It's good to see everybody.
Safe.
Thanks.
All right.
Be well, everyone.
Bye.
Take care.